Hello and welcome. This is Head to Head on uatv and I'm Oles Gerjuk. Ukraine launched its fight against corruption, in particular due to pressure created by our international partners. But it's still a long road ahead, especially after a big confrontation between the main Ukrainian anti-corruption institutions, Special Prosecutor's Office versus Investigational Bureau, and after the unsuccessful attempts to create an anti-corruption court. To help Ukraine, the international partners and organizations launched different projects. Today, we want to talk about one such initiative, and we welcome to the studio Lawrence Held. He is the head of Support to Anti-Corruption Champion Institutions in Ukraine project. Hello, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks very much. Pleasure to be here.
So, Mr. Held, what is the idea behind this Support to Anti-Corruption Champion Institutions in Ukraine project?
Well, this is a 5-year USAID project that's main focus is on the corruption prevention side of the house.
Okay.
Recognizing that anti-corruption is a key issue in Ukraine, USAID created this particular mechanism to focus, to work inside of government institutions to help them with preventative measures. Mm-hmm. And then USAID also has a portfolio that addresses other sectors, and our program is designed to be able to complement anti-corruption efforts across all of the different USAID programs.
But how to prevent corruption? Are there any tools?
Well, it starts, at least with our project, with a willingness to put in anti-corruption measures with leadership of institutions.
You mean the governmental institutions'
Right.
interest? Okay.
Right.
So when did you launch the projects, and are there any results so far?
Right. We've only been in operation for about 6 months so far, so there's been a lot of, naturally enough, with a theme as complicated as anti-corruption, there's a lot of startup and preparation work to get buy-in of the institutions we're working with, to do analysis, to see whether there really is openness to undertaking, for example, very extensive corruption risk assessments, mm-hmm. Which is that's the main tool that we would start with. For example, we've started working with the Ministry of Infrastructure in that area. And likewise, we're working at the regional level as well,
mm-hmm.
with the city of Drohobych and the Sumy Oblast administration.
Could you outline the specifics of this project for Ukraine particularly?
Right. Well, the specifics of this project are to choose national level government institutions that hopefully will serve as role models for other institutions, and then also regional level institutions. And in year one of our project, we're starting in a more narrow, targeted way with institutions that are, well, either there's a sort of a criteria for year one that we've outlined to be able to choose effective partners. One of the first and most obvious criteria is that it has to be an institution that's central to citizen services, where the government interfaces directly with the population, and also has, obviously severe corruption challenges or corruption risks, mm-hmm. which is why.
But do the institutions, they apply by themselves for this program, or how is this?
Yeah,
working?
they did apply to us. In some cases, they applied to us. In others, we did surveys and analyses to begin the project before it even officially started. Mm-hmm. We did a lot of research and analysis to see where the interest was, and to be selected, they really have to be, first and foremost, have demonstrated, political will and interest in undertaking corruption prevention measures.
Mm-hmm. So far, your estimations on how many applications are there for this project?
Well, it's interesting. Of the main line ministries, there were only about 10 or 11 or so that actively reached out to us. And the 2 or 3 that were chosen in the first year were among those. Mm-hmm. But we've deliberately, in some ways, started with a relatively low profile, given the situation with anti-corruption. It's direct communications, but we're not publicly advertising it necessarily. Mm-hmm. It's really more based on discussions and research and analysis.
But what's the logic behind the selection of these champions institutions of this project?
Right. Well, the main logic is again, to focus on institutions that interface with big groups of citizens and where citizen services are particularly acute. It's certainly no surprise that areas like health and education are two of the areas that citizens care most about. So we do certainly want to make sure that we're focusing on institutions that the population is particularly interested. Likewise, infrastructure.
But among the participants, are there only governmental institutions or also the commercial ones? I mean, the private commercial institutions.
Right. Our project is designed to engage the whole community, whether it's civil society organizations or the private sector, in developing solutions to corruption issues. And our main focus is working inside of the government institutions, but getting inputs from other players across Ukrainian society.
But what tools do you use to counter the corruption in Ukraine? Well, to prevent, basically, to teach the organizations, the institutions how to prevent the corruption.
Right. The first tool and the most important one, at least at the beginning, to determine what the needs are these in-depth corruption risk assessments, so that we can see where the main risks are with the institution and then work with them on closing those gaps. And once you have the results of that assessment, then you can start to design specific activities to close the gaps that exist.
Maybe the solution also could be to motivate and to encourage youth to participate and get involved in the public sector. How do you think?
Absolutely. Youth is a big part of our program. In addition to working inside the government institutions, a big part of what we do is helping them communicate their anti-corruption initiatives to the general public. And then also another just very important part of our program, longer term, is reducing or creating a culture of zero tolerance for corruption in the country. And to be able to do that, the youth really has to be the focus. And encouraging and inspiring young professionals to enter public service will be critical to Ukraine's future. So we're working very closely on this issue as well with a number of partners.
But how to create this zero tolerance?
Great question, and it takes a multifaceted approach in many sectors. It's working through civic education in the schools to be able to do that, extracurricular activities, working with the parents, working in communities, designing specific campaigns and outreach activities to engage youth, and also looking at what's interesting for youth, just coming up to youth groups and encouraging them to fight against corruption without it being around a certain issue in their community, whether it's about them doing business or the quality of the food in the community. A lot of times it's a very local issue that youth care about. So then how do we discuss with them what progress they want to make in a certain area, and then work with them on reducing corruption and tolerance for it, because oftentimes corruption is at the heart of the issue that they're trying to address or improve in their community.
But are you talking about some kind of program for youth to learn this zero tolerance to corruption?
We're developing a lot of different kinds of programs. For example, we're doing a series of national and regional level debates around anti-corruption, and we're going to do the best we can to get noted personalities and mentors in the country to leave maybe from Kiev, to leave the confines of Kiev and go out into the regions and engage youth in debate-type programs. There's also a very interesting program that we're doing with the Ministry of Youth and Sport called the State Builder Governance Internship Program. And we're helping the ministry through a very rigorous and competitive selection process identify roughly 100 youth from all over Ukraine that are interested in going into public service in the future, and then working with, I believe it's roughly 15 ministries or so that are part of this internship program, and cabinet ministers, the president's administration. It's all part of the program, and the idea is to develop an internship that's inspiring for them, where they're challenged and learn about public service. And then our interest in that in particular is
to educate the next generation.
To educate the next generation, but also work with the government institutions to promote what they're doing to address corruption issues, and then likewise get youth engaged on corruption issues as they work with the government. And then longer term, stay in touch with the youth that we work with throughout the country, and over the 5-year period, hopefully we've got quite a big network of youth that are switched on to anti-corruption issues.
How do you think, under what conditions can your cooperation with the Ukrainian ministry be the most helpful and efficient?
Right. I think, at least for our project, and there are many other USAID projects that are working in more high-profile ways, or working with civil society organizations. With our project in particular, in some ways, it's the willingness to do a lot of the maybe not so interesting or boring type work inside the institution, yet nevertheless requires a tremendous amount of commitment and dedication. Sometimes it's not the things that are always in the news. How do they select staff? What kind of conflicts of interest are involved when workers or employees in an institution, what do they face when they're making decisions on behalf of citizens? Whistleblowing policies, for example, within institutions. It's a lot of building a culture of anti-corruption within the institution, and from the lowest person all the way to the very top of the institution, encouraging people not to tolerate corruption and being committed to it, and that takes a lot of painful work inside of
course,
institutions for a lot of years.
This is a big goal, but thank you so much. That was Lawrence Held. He's the head of support to anti-corruption champion institutions in Ukraine project. Thank you for watching, and stay tuned with UATV.